Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, my name's Connor, and I want to learn about the Netherlands right now. And that's what we're going to do. Real life lore, hour-long video, probably not going to watch the whole thing. But if you want to see the whole thing, original link, top of the description. Why the Netherlands is Europe's most OP country. Overpowered. Let's learn.
The Netherlands is a small country in the northwest corner of Europe that most people these days
Look at this guy. I can't... See, this is the thing. I can't match this style. Sorry.
These days associate with urban planning YouTubers and amazing bicycling infrastructure. But at first glance, this country may still appear rather unassuming. It's only a little larger than the US state of Maryland is, but with a population of nearly 18 million people all contained within it. The Netherlands is among the most densely populated countries anywhere in the world today. The country's density of people is about on a par with India, and when excluding small city-states, the country is the densest population of people in Europe, behind only Malta, which itself is only a tiny...
Right, I was going to say places like Monaco are probably more dense, but that's not fair.
The island state. Nonetheless, 18 million people is still a rather small population at a global scale, and it's only enough to make the Netherlands the 69th largest country in terms of people.
I love these maps. Just fast forward if you want. So this enlarges it based on its population, and it's funny to see the ones that don't change that much. South Africa doesn't seem like it changes its size too much. Venezuela doesn't. Brazil a bit. Nigeria gets exploded. The US looks pretty similar. Mexico. What is this, though? Looks like Texas, but Texas is right here. What is this? Cuba. Bahamas, Haiti. Who are you? Canada gets demolished. Russia. Poor Mongolia. All right, let's go.
And it's only enough to make the Netherlands the 69th largest country in terms of people. While, of course, in terms of land, the country is even smaller and ranks down at only 131st place worldwide. But despite not having a lot of land and not having a lot of people, the Netherlands punches far, far above its weight in global importance. And I'm going to argue here that the Netherlands is by far the most overpowered country relative to its size in Europe today. Take the country's exports, for example. Somehow, despite being among the world's smaller countries in terms of land and people, the Netherlands is among the absolute biggest countries in the world in terms of how much stuff they export out to the global market. In terms of value of goods and services, the Netherlands is currently the 5th largest exporter in the entire world, pumping out way more goods and services toward the global market than dozens of other countries many times its size are capable of, like
The Netherlands exports more in dollars than India. Singapore, holy crap. That's even more impressive. Damn.
Like India, the UK, or Italy. And when you dig deeper into what kinds of goods and services the Dutch are exporting, it still gets even more interesting.
Flowers.
It probably shouldn't be a surprise to most people that the United States of America is the most dominant agricultural superpower in the world. The country has the second highest amount of total arable land in the world behind only India, while the United States even further completely controls the largest continuous stretch of farmland located anywhere in the world too. The Mississippi River Basin, with a population only a
Thank you, Napoleon.
located anywhere in the world too.
That's essentially right here the Louisiana Purchase. So thank you, Napoleon, for all that farmland. I really want to keep pausing. I love these charts and stuff, but it's 2 minutes in, and I've already paused too much. But this is interesting. Over 50% of India is cultivated land. Oh my God. This is the most interesting column right here. Arable land. India. Oh, that's the world. Oh, I'm stupid. Still a lot,
Total
though.
arable land in the world behind only India, while the United States even further completely controls the largest continuous stretch of farmland located anywhere in the world too. The Mississippi River Basin. With a population only a fraction of India's, the United States is capable of producing far more food than it actually needs for itself. And so it's no surprise then that the United States is the largest exporter of agricultural products in the world. But if you had to guess which country is the second largest exporter of agricultural goods in the world, your mind might wander around other
China.
huge countries with extensive farmland like Russia, Ukraine, France, China, or even Brazil. Very few people would immediately know that despite only having 5% of the population as the United States, and despite the United States
There's no
possessing
way.
a whopping 234 times more land, the little Netherlands is actually the second largest exporter of agricultural products in the world,
How is that possible?
and is somehow able to pump out more than 2/3 of all the agricultural goods to the world market that America does. Once again, beating out countries that are way bigger than it, like Brazil, Germany, and China in the process. In terms of global trade, the little Netherlands is truly one of the world's great powers. And that brings with it some majorly outsized economic power. Despite only being the 131st largest country in terms of land and only the 69th largest country in terms of people, the Netherlands is the 17th largest country in terms of economic size, controlling an annual GDP that is larger than Turkey's, despite having only 1/5 of the population. Perhaps even more impressively, the Dutch economy is presently more than half the size of Russia's, the biggest country in the world that sprawls across Eurasia and that has more than 8 times as many people as the Netherlands does. So how did the Netherlands manage to pull off this massively outsized influence on the world stage? What is it about this country that makes it the most overpowered in Europe? And why is its influence so
smart.
frequently overlooked today when it really shouldn't be? To begin with, it's important to clarify how the geography of the Netherlands directly lends to the country's ability to project trade power, and always has. The country occupies this perfectly positioned spot that's almost dead in the center of Europe.
Historically, the Netherlands are one of, if not the first big world exporters, right? Like way back in like the 1700s. So they've had centuries of experience of good trade.
Roughly equidistant from Spain and Portugal in the west and from Russia in the east. This position has always made the Netherlands a natural stopover point for trade between Russia and Scandinavia in the east and Spain and Portugal in the west. An advantage that is only massively amplified by the fact that many of Europe's mightiest rivers empty out directly at this location as well. The Rhine, Meuse, Scheldt, and Ems rivers all empty out in the North Sea through the
So it's a great port to go to if you want to get goods by river to the inner parts of Europe.
Netherlands and are all highly navigable for most of their lengths, granting easy commercial access to the Dutch coast, deep into the hinterlands of Germany, Switzerland, and France that can be traversed by cheap and easy-to-use river barges. This has made the Netherlands ideally positioned for commerce and trade for centuries. But it's also a double-edged sword, because the rivers emptying out here essentially means that the entire country is basically a giant river delta that's almost surrounded by water, and the Dutch relationship with water virtually defines this entire country. The water simultaneously presents a major threat and a major opportunity to the Netherlands. On the one hand, the very name of the Netherlands, translating roughly into English as the lowlands, gives a hint towards how much of a danger the water can pose. Roughly 26% of the country's landmass today is beneath sea level, and about half of the country is beneath 1 meter in elevation. The country is notoriously flat and low.
Your experience with reclaiming land and protecting from the sea is going to also give you enormous service business to other places around the world that are trying to contain their coastline, and then they're going to want to go to the experts, so that's a giant possible exported service industry.
And the highest point in the entire country is located in the extreme south, far away from the ocean, and only stands at 322 meters high, which is basically just a big hill. This is why, when it comes to average elevation, the Netherlands is the 7th lowest country in the entire world and by far the lowest country in Europe. And even that's not really very fair, because most of the countries that are lower than the Netherlands are tiny Pacific Island states, and none of them are are anywhere near to being as geographically large. So you have all of this super low-lying land directly adjacent to the North Sea, and all of these huge rivers that empty out into the country that basically make the Netherlands the gutter of Europe, which all combine to make the Netherlands among the most catastrophically flood-prone countries in the world. Even today, more than 1 in 5 people in the Netherlands lives in an area that's beneath sea level, or about 3.7 million people. To many countries around the world, their biggest national security threat is their immediate neighbors. Ukraine and Finland prepare for attacks from Russia. Israel prepares for attacks coming from all around them. India prepares for attacks from Pakistan, and South Korea from North Korea, and so on. In a sense, the Netherlands is no different today. But rather than any of their borders on land, it is their border with the sea that is the biggest threat. And rather than any attacks from human beings, it is attacks from the ocean itself that poses the greatest national security threat to the Dutch people. For centuries, the people who have lived here have fought tirelessly to push the ocean back and keep the water out from their lands. The evidence of which is littered all across the country today in the form of windmills that pumped water out of sodden farmland, canals that took the water out to the sea, and dikes that prevented more water from gushing in. More than 700 years ago, back in the 14th century, the Netherlands looked a lot more like this, with significant amounts of the country we know today being buried beneath the sea. Even the location of modern-day Schiphol Airport, the busiest airport in the Netherlands and the 3rd busiest airport in Europe, was underwater back then. But over the many centuries since that time, generation after generation of people in the Netherlands have spent their lives steadily pushing the water back with the aforementioned windmills, canals, and dikes to the point where by the start of
That's insanely beautiful.
the 20th century, the Dutch had reclaimed roughly 1,285,000 acres worth of land from the sea and by draining lakes. But the Dutch didn't always want to push the water out of their country all the time. Sometimes they wanted to let it in as well. Since the Netherlands is a small but densely populated country that's about as flat as a pancake, the Dutch have never really had many natural geographic features to protect themselves against outside invaders coming from France or Germany. But in the 17th century, they realized that deliberately flooding their own low-lying lands in a controlled manner could serve the same defensive role that mountains do for other countries.
Don't they have a star
so their
fort?
geographic weakness of being susceptible to flooding could be cleverly transformed into geographic strength too. Over a period of 200 years from the 17th to 19th centuries, the Dutch tirelessly constructed the waterline, a series of water-based defenses that could be deliberately flooded in the event of an invasion to protect Amsterdam by nearly transforming the Holland region into an island. Later on, between 1880 and 1920, the Dutch constructed an even more extensive system of water-based defenses completely encircling Amsterdam that they called the Amsterdam Defense Line. The line formed a huge ring around the city of Amsterdam that could be deliberately flooded to a shallow depth of about 30 centimeters or 12 inches. Deep enough to be a geographic hindrance to infantry and cavalry, but shallow enough to prevent an enemy from using boats across it. Unfortunately for the Dutch, however, the creation of the Amsterdam
Genius. That is genius. So deep enough that it's going to hinder infantry and getting, you know, cannons and stuff over, but shallow enough that you can't get over with boats. Genius. With obstacles comes innovation. Netherlands, perfect example.
defense line roughly coincided with the invention of the airplane and the tank. And so by the time that Germany invaded the Netherlands in 1940, the Amsterdam defense line was already obsolete. Nonetheless, over the centuries from 1300 to 1900, where the
Well, for airplanes, yes, but still for tanks, I guess maybe some tanks can go.
Dutch reclaimed nearly 1.3 million acres of land from the sea and lakes in the country, they also lost another 1.4 million acres of land area to the Zuiderzee, a shallow bay of the North Sea that was only about 4 to 5 meters deep that existed in the northwest of the country just to the east of Amsterdam. There had long been discussions within the Netherlands to drain the Zuiderzee and reclaim huge amounts of the land within it for human settlement for centuries. But the technological ability for them to actually do that was lacking up until around the late 19th century. It was then in 1891 that a man named Cornelis Lely actually drafted up a feasible plan to drain out the Zuiderzee, a plan that would become the basis for the later Zuiderzee works that would completely and radically transform the geography of the Netherlands forever. In 1916, a violent storm sent a surge of water from the North Sea into the Zuiderzee that overwhelmed several dikes around it and caused wide-scale flooding, which provided the impetus for the Dutch government to officially begin carrying out Cornelis Lely's
So many countries would to have that attitude. It reminds me of like the Amish. It's like if you're the Amish over here are like notoriously known for like there's a Family Guy joke where like a big farmhouse is destroyed and then the Dutch just immediately build it in like 3 seconds. It's like to have that mentality and culture is so impressive and respectable that it's like this giant thing happened and then there'd be in many places there'd be like insane worrying and stuff wouldn't get rebuilt right away and there'd be people migration crises and a lot of bureaucratic political nonsense that in Netherlands it's like, all right, that happened, just get to it. So respectable.
His grand vision for taming the Zuiderzee he had come up with 25 years previously. The first step of the plan called for the construction of a huge dam across the northern section of the Zuiderzee, here running between the Dutch provinces of North Holland and Friesland. The dam would be 32 kilometers or 20 miles long and would come to be called the Afsluitdijk, or the closure dike in English. As its name suggests, the Afsluitdijk was built to isolate the saltwater Zuiderzee from any access to the salty
I might have driven over this.
ocean in the North Sea, and it took the Dutch years of effort to construct it between 1927 and 1932. After it was completed, the dam was designed to include a series of sluice gates that enabled the Dutch to begin draining salt water out of the Zuiderzee, while fresh water would continue flowing into the sea from the River IJssel. Over time, this meant that the Zuiderzee was transformed from a salty outlet of the North Sea into a brand new freshwater lake that the Dutch renamed the IJsselmeer, or the IJssel Lake. And even further, the Afsluitdijk also serves as a causeway, enabling Dutch travelers to drive their vehicles directly from North Holland to Friesland without having to travel all the way around the Zuiderzee like they
It's a dam, a bridge, and a means to turn this into freshwater.
used to. Now, the original plan of the Zuiderzee works was that after the sea was enclosed by the Afsluitdijk and tamed, huge tracts of new land would be built within the new IJsselmeer called polders, which are essentially chunks of an area within the lake that the Dutch would dam off from the rest of the lake with dikes, after which the water enclosed by the dikes would all get pumped out to reveal fresh, dry virgin land suitable for colonization. The first of these polders within the IJsselmeer that the Dutch constructed was this one here called the Veringermeer, that was fully drained to water by 1930. An early proving concept and testbed that would influence the ideas and techniques used in all of the subsequent polder construction going forward. Veringermeer opened up about 307 square kilometers of extra land to the Netherlands that was incorporated within the North Holland province, and more than 12,000 people live there today. A few years later, work on the second polder, named the Noordoostpolder, began in 1936 and was eventually fully drained out and ready for settlement by 1942.
I love how every problem that they see, they just see they don't only see a solution to the problem, but they see how they could turn that problem into an asset. Is phenomenal. I'll be right back, guys. I just spilt water all over my shirt. It'll dry. All right, let's get back into it.
Began in 1936 and was eventually fully drained out and ready for settlement by 1942. And then, after the conclusion of the Second World War, work finally began on the single largest land reclamation projects of the entire Zuiderzee works in the south of the IJsselmeer. Originally intended to be a single massive polder, work on dredging up Flevoland finally began in 1950. But several changes were made to the original plan as they went about it. The development of the previous Noordoostpolder had left the new, lower-lying land in the polder directly connected to the older and higher elevated mainland, which led to groundwater.
Right, I remember learning about this. They had to make some sort of canal through this side
from the higher mainland seeping into the new lower,
so that it could seep into the trench and then just kind of go around
land, which led to the ground in the mainland to start sinking and causing all kinds of problems.
Oh my god, look at this. So anything this color to this is below sea level. -7 feet. All here, here. How is it not getting in there? Oh.
The original
A dike, obviously.
plan for the Flevoland polder was to leave it connected to the mainland as well. But after observing the problems with the Noordoostpolder, the Dutch decided to change the design of Flevoland into two separate halves, an eastern Flevoland polder and a southern Flevoland polder, with a narrow southern channel of water separating both of them from the mainland. Unlike the two polders that came before it, Flevoland was both geographically large enough and close enough to the major city of Amsterdam that Dutch planners knew it had the potential to host major cities on it after it was finished being dredged up. As a result, after Eastern Flevoland was finished being created in 1957, and after Southern Flevoland was finished up a decade later in 1968, they became the site of the biggest planned cities on the new polders, like Almere, strategically and conveniently located only about 20 kilometers away from the bustling city center of Amsterdam.
I want to say to Dutch people, right, people from the Netherlands, I'm looking at you. So, this is so incredibly impressive because so many countries around the world, 99% of them, I'm sure, if not 100% other than you, could take a problem like this and find a solution to it that not only stops it, but also benefits you, and to create all of these sophisticated locks and areas and solving this problem with this water canal area. You guys are so freaking smart, and you should be incredibly proud of that. The amount of respect I have for the Dutch and the Dutch engineers is insanely high. This is so impressive. I just wanted to say that.
The Netherlands' biggest city, Almere, is therefore the most recently settled city in the Netherlands that was only established in 1975.
Are those solar panels or houses?
And it's also, probably to my knowledge, the largest city in all of Europe that was only settled in the 20th century. The very first house in Almere was...
Oh, is that grass? That's beautiful. That is freaking beautiful. And the fact that all of this used to be salt water underneath, like in this area before these were here, and then you drain the salt water and let the fresh water in, means that you're going to have, you might not even have to water this stuff. It's just, its roots will be down and suck up the fresh water.
It was only finished in 1976.
Beautiful grass.
And fast forward roughly half a century later to today, and Almere has ballooned to a population of about 215,000 residents, making it the largest city to be established on any of the new Dutch polders and the 8th largest city in the Netherlands nationwide.
Bigger than my
and
state
by 2030,
capital.
Almere plans to construct enough housing to boost their city population up to 350,000 residents, which by that point could make Almere the 5th largest city in the country. By 1986, the Netherlands did something that no other country in Europe had done in the 20th century. They declared a brand new province out of their freshly created land they had conquered from the sea. Dubbed the Flevoland province, it encompasses all of the newly created land in the Noordoostpolder and the southern and eastern Flevoland polders, representing a total amount of land that's larger than Hong Kong that was conquered not through...
Guys, are these turbines able to rotate? Like, do they have computer sensors that, like, sense where the wind is going so that it can automatically adjust by rotating the blades to get the maximum effect of the wind?
Brute military force at the expense of others, but through decades of brilliant and forward-looking engineering for the benefit of the state. The creation of the Flevoland province from nothing has dramatically assisted the housing crisis in the densely populated Netherlands too. As of 2023, about 445,000 people live within Flevoland on land that didn't even exist only a few decades ago,
That's
as is
insane.
symbolized by the province's official anthem called Where We Make Cities Arise. Today, roughly 20% of all the land in the Netherlands has been reclaimed from the sea at some point or another over the past 700 years, representing an area of land that is larger than nearby Luxembourg that has been conquered by Dutch engineers rather.
You guys are so good that you are one of the most prone countries to sea rising, and yet you're also one of the countries that I'm least worried about that sea rising because you're so goddamn smart and good at this.
Than by Dutch soldiers. And the country still isn't finished yet with reclaiming even more land from the sea either. You see, the original
If the Netherlands keeps going, Doggerland might rise again. Isn't Doggerland that former giant land that connected the UK to mainland Europe, right? I wouldn't be surprised if the Dutch just make all of that into land.
The original plan for the Zuiderzee works called for another fifth polder to be constructed here in the southwest of the IJsselmeer. It was going to be called the Markerwaard polder, with a narrow canal between it and the southern Flevoland polder leading directly to Amsterdam so that Amsterdam would maintain its maritime access to the rest of the lake. The Markerwaard polder, had it ever been built, was planned to add another 410 square kilometers of colonizable land to the country's territory, about equivalent to the Hawaiian island of Lanai in scale. Between 1963 and 1975, the Dutch slowly constructed what many believed was the prerequisite step for this fifth polder, a large 28-kilometer-long dike or dam across the IJsselmeer that split the lake into two that became known as the Hoetrip Dike.
Guys, so a dike is essentially just a beaver dam, right? Like, it's not a dam in that, like, it's used for, you know, maybe some bridges passing through or for hydroelectric power. A dike is just a mound of earth and rock that is constructed to cut off water, right?
After its completion, the Hoetrip Dike divided the IJsselmeer into two separate distinct lakes, which led to the lake to the west of the Hoetrip Dike becoming known as the Markermeer Lake, and the rest of the IJsselmeer staying named as the IJsselmeer. The Hoetrip Dike also provided a direct overland connection for vehicles to take between Flevoland and the northern part of North Holland. And after its completion, the Markerwaard polder was originally intended to be developed out of the Markermeer Lake. But then, for decades, none of that ever ended up happening. On the one hand, those in favor of pushing on with the Markerwaard polder argued that it would open up new agricultural land, create new housing, and open up the possibility of building a brand new airport close by to Amsterdam to relieve congestion at Schiphol Airport.
Guys, so I hated that I didn't see one of these type of windmills when me and my dad, my brother were. If you've heard any of my European stories, you've heard all of them. I only have a few. I've been there twice, and one of the times was way back in 2006 when I was a kid. But back like 9 years ago, me, my dad, and my brother went over to Europe and drove through from Heathrow through the Channel Tunnel into France, up through Belgium, into the Netherlands, down through Germany, into Austria, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, back to France, and back to England, right? And I saw so many, not just in the Netherlands, but in Germany and in France, of the modern giant white windmills, right? But these are the windmills that I think of, and I think a lot of Americans think of when they think of Dutch windmills, as these old-timey ones. And so are most of these, or all of them, used are just like historical pieces, or are these ones just used for draining? And if they are used for draining, then why don't they update them to look more modern and probably be better at draining?
Polder argued that it would open up new agricultural land, create new housing, and open up the possibility of building a brand new airport close by to Amsterdam to relieve congestion at Schiphol Airport. But on the other hand, those in favor of keeping the Markermeer as a lake argued that in the case of a drought, the lake's water would be useful for a drinking water supply, and that during heavy weather events, the lake would serve as a valuable buffer zone protecting Amsterdam and Almere from the wrath of the sea. Concerns
a drought, but like it was said earlier, you have some of the largest rivers in Central and Western Europe flowing through your country. I mean, are the rivers going to dry up? So don't you have essentially unlimited fresh water?
over the Markerwaard's financial viability began to emerge in the 1980s as the debate continued on. And the project was eventually indefinitely suspended in 1986, and then completely canceled altogether later on in 2003.
Guys, I'm not going to watch the whole video, but I do want to just see if there are some other parts here. Ooh, what's this?
Effectively reduced the length of the Dutch coastline, and reduced the number of dikes that had to be raised in order to better defend the length.
Okay, now I regret that, because I want to know what this is.
1,000 buildings were destroyed. The disaster destruction for to keep established in their out from everything that they've spent generations building. Flooding has been a constant concern in this country since time immemorial, and in 1953, the country suffered an extremely devastating one. A powerful storm gathered in the North Sea and sent a huge surge of water smashing against the southward coast of the Netherlands, in between the Zeeland province and Rotterdam. The levees and dikes in the area were overwhelmed and breached in dozens of
What a legend. He's using 2 chairs to walk
province
over.
and Rotterdam. The levees and dikes in the area were overwhelmed and breached in dozens of locations, sending the storm surge through and flooding nearly 1,400 square kilometers of land in the country. The resulting destruction
Is he handing bread?
nearly 1,400 square kilometers of land in the country. The resulting destruction was utterly catastrophic. More than 1,800 people in the Netherlands were killed by the water's fury, while 9% of the country's farmland was inundated with seawater and 10,000 buildings were destroyed. The disaster produced so much grief and shock in the nation that the entire country collectively vowed that such a thing should never be possible in the future again. And so
Again, obviously that's horrible and very horrible. But again, this is a country that doesn't just wallow in grief for too long or wallow in like overwhelming destruction, and it's just like, all right, get back to work. It's like, solve the problem. I don't think a lot of countries have that camaraderie and that thought process.
began the impetus for another decades-long macro-engineering project in the country that became known as the Delta Works. While the Zuiderzee works were primarily offensive in nature, conquering new land from the sea, the Delta Works were designed to be more defensive in nature and would ultimately prove to be effectively the Dutch version of China's Great Wall. In 1958, the Dutch government pledged to spend a whopping 20% of its total national GDP on the project that would be spread out over the next 25 years. For about the next 3 decades after that, the Dutch society built out a massive series of dams, dikes, levees, sluices, locks, and storm surge barriers all across the provinces of Zeeland and South Holland that were most severely affected by the 1953 flood, the aim of which was to effectively reduce the length of the Dutch coastline and reduce the number of dikes that had to be raised in order to better defend this part of the country from the wrath of the North Sea.
Question, guys. This might be very stupid because I can't really get the scale. Like, how far is this right here? Maybe like 50 miles, 40 miles. But you know those sea breaks? Stone Harbor sea breakers. Yeah, like, let's see if I can find a good example. And that's not that great. This is kind of what I'm trying to get across. Like this, but not exactly. I guess more like this. Like one of these that stretches like all this way, but that's a super long way to do that, so maybe that's not feasible. And it's just to like break the initial waves coming into from the ocean. It's not going to completely protect it from the water, but it'll at least break the waves so that they're less destructive when they reach the coast. But that might still be a really dumb and unfeasible idea by me, but just wanted to ask.
Be raised in order to better defend this part of the country from the wrath of the North Sea. There are many incredibly impressive feats of engineering that the Dutch pulled off during the Delta Works project, but a few of the most impressive include the Oosterscheldekering, translated into English as the Eastern Scheldt Storm Surge Barrier, that was constructed over the course of a decade between 1976 and 1986. This single giga project is the largest single storm surge barrier ever constructed by humanity, and it basically serves serves as a gigantic gate that protects the inner part of the Netherlands' Zeeland province from the North Sea. Its sluice gates normally remain open to allow water to freely travel between both sides. But in the event of a dangerous storm surge emerging in the North Sea, the sluice gates can be slammed shut, and the Oosterscheldekering transforms into a protective shield to keep the water out. One of the other greatest marvels of engineering that the Dutch created in the overall Delta Works project was
What if you made another dumb idea? Actually, why am I even saying this?
water to merging in the forms into a protective shield to keep the water out.
But what if you made a bunch, like, see this right here? What if you made a long, like one of the things I said, storm break, and have windmills on those things? No.
Out. One of the other greatest marvels of engineering that the Dutch created in the overall Delta Works project was right here at the artificial mouth of the Rhine River, only about a 30-minute drive west of downtown Rotterdam, the second largest city in the Netherlands and home to the country's biggest port. Rotterdam is a city that is particularly vulnerable to flooding naturally, because about 90% of the city's area lies beneath sea level, and it's located directly adjacent to the Rhine and very close by to the North Sea. Thus, between 1991 and 1997, the Dutch constructed a massive storm surge barrier right at the mouth of the river that they called the Maaslandkering. The structure consists of two gargantuan arms, each roughly the size of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and each about twice as heavy, making the structure the largest moving object that humanity has ever created. When water levels in the North Sea are detected to be high enough to cause a storm surge through the river towards Rotterdam, the Maaslandkering gates can be given the order to close in a process that takes 2.5 hours to complete, after which the enormous water pressure in the North Sea.
I would love to see the inside machinery under these things to move such a massive, heavy thing. I would love to see like the size of the engines.
Gets transferred from the wall of the gates to the two largest ball joints in the entire world, implanted on the river's banks, each one having a diameter of 10 meters and a weight of 680 tons. An advanced computer system can automatically close and open the gates based on the water levels on either side, and it, along with the rest of the other massive projects in the overall Delta Works program, were designed to protect the Netherlands from even a once in 10,000 year intensity storm. It's a small wonder then that the Delta Works defensive program and the Zuiderzee Works offensive program together were named as one of the 7 wonders of the modern world by the American Society of Civil Engineers in 1994. And all of this extensive experience at fighting against the ocean like nobody else has over decades and centuries have made the Dutch the foremost global experts in protecting themselves from rising sea levels in the global ocean.
Guys, I'm going to stop it there. I never intended to watch the whole thing. If you want to see the whole thing, original link top of the description. And who knows, maybe I'll continue it in a part 2. Love y'all. I love engineering. It's fascinating. I always have a lot of questions about it. A lot of you guys are awesome at answering in the comments. If I said something wrong, stupid, which I think I did a few times here, call me out, all right, please. I would love nothing more. If I'm wrong, I want to know it. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.